Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. Today, Katie and I are going to be discussing the problems with big families, potential problems that can arise from having an above average number of children in your home. As many of you know, I'm one of 10 children. Katie's the eldest of 11 children. And when you're in a big family, you find yourself around other big families. And so we have been fortunate enough to see a variety of styles and I would say even of outcomes when it comes to big families and how people do it. So we're going to be discussing the pros, the cons, the potential risks of having a big family. And I would say now that we have our 6 children, we can get into this. I feel like we're kind of getting into that range of big family.
Well, we had to buy a van, so I think that qualifies us. Once you join the van, you're like driving on the street and you look over, I was today, and every time you pass a van, you're like, hey, I know who you are. So, it's nice to be in the club.
So before we jump in, I do want to thank all of you that have left ratings and reviews. Katie and I were just on iTunes the other day looking at some of the most recent reviews that you have gone on there and left, and we were so blessed by them. So thank you for doing that. And if you have not yet done that, it would mean so much to us if you take the time to leave a rating or a review on iTunes or Spotify or really wherever you listen to a podcast. And if you do watch our podcast on YouTube, we would love it if you're able to subscribe to our channel or hit the like button or even leave a comment below. Maybe you're from a big family, so I'd love to hear your perspective on being from a big family. Maybe you have many children. I'd love to hear your perspective on parenting many children in the comments below. Yeah,
it's funny. You mentioned ratings and reviews, and for whatever reason, yesterday we were sitting on the couch because we just did an interview with on the Marriage After God podcast. Or we didn't just do an interview; it just went up on that podcast.
Yes.
And we were friends with Aaron and Jen back when we both first started podcasts, and it just flashed me back because I remember they had this big podcast and we just started and we had like 3 reviews and one of them was really negative. And it's just so sweet to see we were pregnant, I think with our second or third.
I think with our third when we started the podcast.
With our third. Yeah. And it's just so sweet to see where the Lord's brought us and just to see your guys' involvement and engagement, because it's just a really big blessing to see what the Lord's done here and what he continues to do. And it's not lost on us, I guess, your guys' participation in that. So thank you.
No doubt. Yeah. I feel so privileged to be able to do this, meet people because of this podcast. Even it's a big part of even how we provide in our home, financial provision. And that is entirely because of you guys. Like we would just not be able to do it without obviously the listeners. So thank you all so much for not just listening, but for encouraging us in whatever capacity you've done that.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. What an intro. That was a long one. We will now get the actual episode started.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
So big families are always on our mind, obviously, having come from them, having still living in them, getting to live in them, and then raising our own. It's funny because everyone we're around, I feel like we're a normal sized family, and with who we grew up with, we're a small family.
Right.
And I mean, friends from then, I still just think, oh man, we have 6 kids, but I feel like it's so small. And then I forget that the majority of the world still, like the Western world, still isn't hitting a 2-point average, or an average of, 2 people per couple.
Like 2 children. Yeah.
Yeah. And, that I just said that's so weird, like 3 times.
Well, it's okay.
Trying to clarify.
Most couples do usually amount to 2 people.
Yeah.
But things are getting weird out there. So.
Anyways, so it's kind of fun. But when Elisha said this, I don't know what you have in mind. I'll say that. Elisha was like, we're going to do a problem with big families. And we have done an episode before on red flags in big families. So I did have a lot of those, and we'll link that episode down below. A lot of you guys related with those, but he was like, it'll be fun. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I think what got me thinking down this path was realizing, I don't know why it dawned on me, but actually I do know why it dawned on me. You already said it. was shopping for the big van, and it was then purchasing a big van. And I realized, oh, we're in that category. We're a big van family now. Because I had always seen myself as being from a big family, but I did not view our family as a big family. And I think we always knew we were going to end up, Lord willing, with an above average size family, because we love children. We loved being from large families. But I never viewed us as a big family, even when we were having children pretty rapidly early on.
Pretty regularly.
Yeah, it was, yeah, exactly. Our children were close together. They pretty much have always been close together, but, it's like we weren't known as a big family. Even people that, like our landlord, I think of our first apartment, he just assumed, and he would say this, he's like, oh God, you're just trying to get it out of the way real quick, right? Like that's why you had your first two close together, so you can just move on with your life. And then we had our third, and he's like, okay, I got it. You just want to have your third and then move on with your life. And I think a lot of people that we would come in contact with just assumed that was our philosophy. It was like, just get the kids, get the child rearing years behind us so we can move on with our lives. And that was never our perspective. And yet here we are. And I'm like, wow, 6 is, I feel like I would consider that, even growing up in a family of 10 children, I was like, oh, 6 kids is a lot of kids. And the big van is, I know that seems like really, like, I don't know, practical, but that for whatever reason in my brain flipped a switch. And I was like, okay, I think we're a big family now. And so I started looking at different articles online regarding, pitfalls of big families, or red flags in big families, or shortcomings of big families. And it really was interesting to see whether it was, I guess, academic journals covering the subject, sociologists covering the subject, ex-homeschoolers talking about their experience, and ex-big family members talking about their experience. And so I kind of comprised a list of what the most common, shortcomings were, or the pitfalls, or the potential dangers of having big families. What those are, and I'm gonna read them off. Are you curious?
I'm dying to know.
Yeah, they're not going to be that surprising to you. Okay, so the number one thing that both advocates of big families and people that were kind of poo-poo on big families had was that there's not enough one-on-one time with children. Okay, so not that quality connection between parent and child was the most kind of common reason people said it was that can be a downfall to big families. And we've gotten this question numerous times in regards to our experience, and they said, well, how did you feel like your parents were able to connect with you? Or like, did you feel like you were just a number, or you were just a part of a clan? And again, I would always say like, I connected with both of my parents, and I think my siblings would say the same thing. They have said it at different times where they felt like they could have any conversation at any time with either of our parents, right? I never, ever had that. Well, actually, what people might picture, that the scenario that people might picture where you're a teenager and you're struggling with whatever, insecurities or self-identity, and you're feeling, discouraged or depressed, and you're trying to talk to your parents about it, but they're just running, they're taking care of diapers, and they're running the other kids to practice, and they're, putting out fires throughout the home, figuratively, right? Hopefully figuratively. I never felt that. I felt like a lot of feeling here. If I felt like I was feeling like it was time to have a heartfelt conversation with my parents, they were accessible to me. And I don't know what your thoughts are on your childhood, but that's what it was for me.
Yeah, I think this is really easy to fall into this trap of believing this as a parent, believing that you can't be there for all of your children, so you should stop having children, because time is finite. But what's interesting is because I fall into this trap. I fall into this trap of thinking, if we have another child, I'm not going to be able to be a good parent to the children I currently have, because I only have so much time and I can barely pour into the ones that I have now. And yet I hear that same argument with people who choose to have one child or choose to have 2 children. And I immediately go, well, that is not true. Your capabilities totally grow as a parent. The Lord, if you have this desire to be the parent that God wants you to be to your children, and if God's chosen to still give you children, then he's going to give you the bandwidth to be able to pour into those children. It will be at the expense of other things. And I think that that is something that I experienced firsthand growing up in my family, as I experienced my parents saying no to other things. And my mom was a great example of this, where she just said, no. She's super talented, super business savvy, super, I don't know, just all kinds of opportunities came her way. People have always wanted her to speak and share and minister and all these things. And she just chose my dad. I remember he would come home and be like, Janice, I really feel like you could help me in our business. And she just was like, I can't. We chose to have a large family. The Lord's given us a large family, and I can't. And so I do think that in order for this to not be true, it's not just going to work itself out. There's two sides to this. One is you have to be incredibly intentional for this to not be the case, because this is the default, is you will not give every child the attention they need, but it is 100% possible to. You just have to be cutthroat on other opportunities. And honestly, that's something that I struggle with now. It's hard to make those decisions and say no to other things.
Yeah, I'm really glad you acknowledged the no's that were said, the countless no's that were said, so that our parents could say yes to their children and yes to the family. And I think I'm only just now starting to realize that. My dad would always say things to me when we started having children. He's like, you have to be all in. If you're going to have children, you have to be all in on parenting. You have to be all in with your wife and be fully present, be fully committed. And I'm sure, like with so many things in life, you think you're all in. You're like, yeah, I get it. Like I'm all in, okay? And then life keeps going, and you realize, oh, okay, got it. Like more time needs to go into the kiddos now that they're getting older. I didn't realize that something else needed to be, trimmed from my life. Roger that. Being all in means, leaving this thing behind, and it continues happening, and which is a joy, right? Like we use that term sacrifice other things, or, forsake other things. But that is the only way to excellence in anything, right? If you're going to experience excellence, or above average results, even in any category, it's going to be at the expense of pretty much everything else. Like you're going to say no to pretty much everything except for that thing that you want excellent results in. Do we want excellent results in family? Yeah, we want that more than any other area of our life. And so odds are we're probably going to have to say no to like every other category that you could think of. And I'm now realizing how often my parents did that. They were saying no. And so when I see this concern, or when I see this being a downside to big families, I do think, and I think we talked about this in the red flags, I've heard a lot of families, brush it off as they're like, well, that's silly. Of course our kids' needs are going to be met. And I don't think that should be a response at all. Like it doesn't just automatically happen. Do we have the capability and the capacity can we grow our capacity to meet the needs of a large number of children? Absolutely. But it doesn't just happen. And I do think that the reason that this is a concern is because it doesn't happen oftentimes, is where you will see whatever the head count is, children going, being missed, them going under the radar, or them getting overlooked on some level. And that's not what we want, but it doesn't just happen. You know what? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Daddy even mentioned this. My father mentioned this in an interview that we just recently did with them. We could post that down below as well, where he did mention that when some of the middle kids were in their adolescent years, he started to say yes to a lot more opportunities, and feels like that was a time that he regrets and felt like he was overlooking things and wasn't putting into those kids during those years like he could have. And the beautiful thing is that God's mercies are new every morning, and there is, you have a parent-child relationship for life, and so choosing to be intentional in that relationship can happen even when you've been like, oh man, I've been more mentally absent the last year or two or whatever. You can still choose to pour into that relationship, have a great relationship. I think my father's totally done that with those siblings. But that's a very real thing. And I think you have to just keep your head in the game for a really long time when your span of children stretches out over, 2 decades.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like you might have budgeted in your brain for a 10-year period where you're going to be really engaged, but really you should have budgeted for 20 years, 22 years. And I'll kind of, I'm not pushing back because I think we agree on this, but you talked about like, you have this lifelong relationship with your child, but I think a lot of people have made the mistake of thinking I'll get serious about parenting when my kid, they'll proactively like make conscientious decisions to put investing into their children to the side so that they can advance in their career, they can pursue these other things, thinking, I think falsely, that later in life, they'll really be able to plug in with their kids when they're in those teen years and they're able to connect more on an adult level, or when they're in those, later teen years and they get to talk about, their career choices and they get to give them the counsel for young adult living. That's not how it works. I really do think that you need to be committed early on and stay committed through that season. I agree with your point that we are constantly, repenting from getting overextended and committing to things that are outside of our children in our home to the detriment of our family in our home. And so we're constantly coming back, and and the Lord's so merciful in those times to bring us back. And yeah, you can have a year where you're thinking, what was I doing? I need to get back in the game here. You can have multiple years, maybe even, but you can't like make this plan. It's like, man, I'm going to check out. I mean, not check out, but I'm not going to give my full, I guess, energy to the family for the next 10 years. I'm going to pursue my career, get set there. And then I don't think that's how it works. And then dive into the home.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. And a story to illustrate that point that I think is super powerful is the true story of this kid that flew his kite. I've mentioned this before, but it really stuck with me. He flew this kite over a giant canal, I don't know, a big cliff, like a big span that they wanted to build a bridge over. And they used his tiny, skinny little kite string and attached a thicker rope, barely thicker rope, drug that across, then attached a little thicker rope, drug that across until eventually they hung the first cable for this bridge all the way across this big cliff. What do you call those things?
A crevasse or a
like the Grand Canyon,
okay.
Like a canyon. And I think of that when it comes to our children and our conversations with them. Is right now during these little years, we're flying these little kite strings back and forth and dragging these little ropes when it comes to tying heartstrings, when it comes to building trust, when it comes to navigating difficult conversations. So many people want to wait till their kids are in their teen years and then try to chuck a cable across a canyon. And it's like, there's nothing to attach it to. And the cable just falls down in the hole, And so it's really, really important. We can't just expect our kids for us to have this strong cable that we can just, throw out a big discussion or a big topic and have there be trust and have there be rapport and all those things in our kids' teen and adult years. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So every season is really, really important, and it builds on itself. The Get It All Done Club is for the woman who wants to stop drowning in motherhood and wants to start thriving. If you want to have more free time to do the things that you love to do and become more efficient at the tasks that you have to do each day, join the Get It All Done Club. There's thousands of women who have been through the program and who are currently in our private community that is off of social media. I'm in there monthly, live, answering your questions, talking with you guys, adding new content monthly. If you would like to get a little taste of what I teach in the Get It All Done Club and see a behind the scenes of what the program actually looks like, I do have a free masterclass for you guys. It's linked down below, and it will teach you how to have a more peacefully productive home this week.
Agree. Yeah. And in considering that lack of one-on-one time or your lack of ability to connect with a kid, it's just brought me to so much gratitude towards my parents. Like I'm realizing more and more just as I grow older, now that I have my own children, whoa, they were radical. They got the results that they got. The results meaning 10 Christian children that are, the ones that are married are, married into Christian spouses, and they're raising the next generation up in the faith, and they've got a great relationship with all of their children. All of their children come to them for counsel and for guidance. And so to me, it's like, that's what I want, right? I want that. But my parents were so intentional. And there was an element of forsaking all else for that. And what's funny is that you end up, when that is the thing, you're like, okay, I'm going to pour into my family, my children, my marriage, the home. You what follows, I think, oftentimes, or what flows from that is being above average in other areas. So my dad wasn't this guy that wanted to go out there and crush it in the business world and be an entrepreneur and, grow his net worth. But he wanted a home that was highly functioning. He wanted time freedom. He wanted his children to have work opportunities. And from that motivation, my dad would be considered a successful entrepreneur, but his heart was to pour into his family. And so I think that you get creative and you become, above average in your career or in providing, even when you're making that thing the main thing. And I think your dad's another testimony to that as well, where he's excelled in the business world, not at the expense of his family, but because of his family. He was in it for his family.
And I also think, I know we need to move on to point 2, but I also think that it's something to be aware of, that different kids are going to demand your attention and will always seek it out. And it doesn't necessarily matter what birth order they're in. We interviewed your brother Vance on the podcast, and he was saying, I was always able to get attention from my parents, and he's second from the bottom of 10. I'm the eldest. I was I would really pursue my parents to get that attention. And then there's some kids that just aren't going to they need to be pursued for that attention. And so I think watching different siblings grow up in our home has made me very aware of, okay, I need to make sure I'm pursuing each one of our children. Some of them will demand the attention, and some of them will just be happy-go-lucky going along with the flow, but they still really want to be pursued.
No doubt. Yep. And once again, it's up to the parent to make those judgment calls of saying, you know what, I think I need to, draw this child out. Anyways, and also just one more thing. My dad, and he said this recently, he's like, he felt, maybe my sister Liddy said this in reference to my parents, but this obligation that you have to your children. We find ourselves, that term it's like frowned upon, but we are obligated to our spouse. We have a duty to our spouse. We have a duty to our children. We did bring them into this world. And I think that you need to feel a healthy level of obligation to seeing to their well-being. And there is an element of duty that is there to your children and to your spouse and to the home. And I think that's a good thing to feel. Okay, next point. So I kind of summed this all up into one, and that is just less resources or not enough resources, because people would say, there's not enough money. You don't have very nice stuff, hand-me-down clothes, not a big enough house. The cars are always used. The money's not there for college. You can't do the vacations. And so there is a variety of things people would point to. And so I just said, lack of resources because of the high number of kids. There's kind of like less money per child, right? Less money to go around. And again, I do think it's incumbent upon the parent to instill a value system in your children that is not based on material goods and that does not see, value as being something that can only be achieved through brand new cars or name brand clothes. And I do think I felt like I had such a rich childhood. And even though my dad's done well, financially over the last, couple of decades, he would be the first to admit it was tight for a long time, right? We were, it wasn't this extravagant, luxurious life when I was a child and in my early teens. It was always, used cars, hand-me-down clothes, lots of soups and casseroles, right? At the time I didn't realize it, but then it's like, in looking back, it's like, oh, there was a huge grocery. There was that was a factor were the cost of groceries. And my mom had to get really creative and stretching the budget, right? Really making the ingredients go further. We weren't taking trips, right? We were not traveling the world. We were not staying at resorts. And I just had a ball as a child. Not once at the time did I feel deprived, even though I knew other kids would. It's like I was aware of those things happening, right? I had cousins that were flying to Hawaii every year, or that had a second home, or that bought brand new clothes, or their parents had brand new cars. Like I saw those things, and I saw that we did not have those things, and yet I didn't spend my life wishing I had those things. I thought they were great, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. And we'd watch slideshows that they put together of their vacations to Europe. We're like, that's awesome. But I didn't sit there as an 11-year-old feeling insecure about the hand-me-down. In fact, my hand-me-downs probably came from them, right? It came from those cousins. So I was probably grateful to them. And so is there less money to go around? Well, one, there doesn't have, money is, you can make as much of it as really as you set your mind to, here on this earth. So it's how much you want to prioritize that. But secondly, it's like I think regardless of whether you have one child or, 19 children, you need to instill in them a value system that is not materialistic.
Yeah, it's so fun. I'm just smiling as I think of your childhood because it's like we were broke. Like I so relate to that. And when I hit 15, my dad was making really good money at that point and had become very successful. A big part of that drive, I think, was he knew he wanted a big family. And so he was just trying to find what was going to work because he did want to take us on ski trips. And he did have all these visions of things he wanted to do with his kids that did require a lot of money. And so he was trying to figure out, how do I make this work? But I mean, we were in debt. We were so broke. And I never knew it until way later. I always thought we were super rich. And I think it's because my parents never made us feel the stress of the finances that they were going through. Life was really, really fun. And we always had really fun experiences. My dad and my mom both made everything a party. And I knew they loved each other. We had good times. And I didn't, I laugh because you mentioned hand-me-downs, and it's like, yeah, my cousins gave us hand-me-downs, but actually your sisters gave us a ton of hand-me-downs.
Nice.
And so they were like the hand-me-downs and the hand-me-downs. And I love their clothes. Side note, that was so much fun when they would give us their clothes.
Nice.
But yeah, it was not a factor at all. We drove a beater minivan, and then my dad got insecure about that. And so he bought this new Expedition with leather seats and everything. And what's funny is my happiness level did not go up or down with the leather seats. And then we sold that because it was, keeping us in so much debt. And we bought a 15-passenger van that was like total beater. And again, like it did not affect my life. And I don't know if we were just around other people who were living the same life. Right. We were definitely around people who made a lot more money at different times. It just was never a stress that I carried as a child or a burden. I just thought we always had the most fun as a family, and I'd rather be in my family than anyone else's.
Yeah, and I even go because something that was highlighted was not being able to have your own bedroom. This was kind of a common theme in these articles that I was reading. And I was like, we always thought that would be the worst thing ever.
I know. I was like, who wants their own bedroom?
There was 10 kids in our family, and we had a boys' room and a girls' room. Those were the bedrooms, and it was 6 boys in the boys' room, and it was 4 girls in the girls' room, and we didn't want it any other way. It was so fun, and so yeah, if you're stacked in on top of each other, it can be hectic, but it can also be a blast, and I think we truly enjoyed that, and we still sit around, when we're together at holidays, we reminisce on those times as being fun and good, and so anyways.
Well, those are the times you think of a sleepover with your friends and the pillow talk that happens and how you can just feel like you could talk about anything at nighttime. And it's like, that's what my sisters and I had consistently. Yeah. And I think there's something too, it's just in our Western culture where we think that the isolation and having all our own stuff is ideal. Transitioning to marriage is kind of hard if that's your belief system. I tell you what, it's easy to go from sharing a room in a house with 10 people or 12 people to go to sharing a house with one person. It's a lot of fun to just be like, wow, we just keep this so clean and so tidy and everything's, I don't know, just sharing enjoyment, sharing memories, sharing all kinds of things is a huge blessing. I hated sharing clothes with my sisters, and I still don't miss that because we would definitely fight like cats and dogs over that stuff. But I just think that's where memories are made. That's where life is rich, is in the relationships. So I think that's like a cancerous thought. Like, where are kids getting that thought that it's better to have my own room? It'd be better if we didn't have another baby. Like, is that coming from peers? Is that coming from, like the school? Is that coming from the books they're reading? Is that like, where's that coming from? Because I remember growing up, there was a family that was having children at the same pace as ours. And then their parents stopped for a while and then picked up and started having kids again. And their sons were about the same age as us girls. And I remember them saying, we don't want another baby. And Kyla and I, my sister and I were like, why don't you want another baby? Babies are awesome. And they're like, no, it just means less stuff for us. And it was so funny because they said that. And I was like, what? Like that never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Like you said, we know that isolated, individualistically minded life is going to be a very fruitless life. It's like we want fruit. We want the fruit of relationships, and you can't have relationships without people being around. And I think that the earlier you get to experience that in a positive light, like, does it come through work? Yeah, there's work involved, and there's, again, sacrifices involved, and learning to share and learning to work with other people. But those are all prerequisites for a happy life anyways, right? Like, so why not just learn it in the home with people that you're related to, that you're going to be in contact with for the rest of your life? And then another, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, because another thing that I lumped this all into the same category.
Wait.
Okay, go ahead.
But are you going to a different category?
Kind of. I mean,
okay, because I want to say one more thing to that real quick. I guess I think it's really comes down to a scarcity mindset. And my parents were really good about not having a scarcity mindset. It wasn't like they showed us a big pie graph of like, these are the resources of our family.
Right.
When Johnny enters the family, your slice of pie gets smaller.
Yes.
Like I didn't see life that way. No. It was like, another relationship means more fun, more memories, more good times, not like less lasagna. Yeah. And so I think that it's important that if our kids have that mindset, we work on figuring out where that's coming from.
Yes.
What are we communicating to our kids? Because that's just not how life works.
Yeah. Again, the abundance mindset is so critical in many areas of life. People talk about it from a financial or a business standpoint, but it is relationally too, to say, no, this is more opportunity. This is more fun. This is more experiences with this child. And we have the opportunity to instill within our children that perspective. Before actually I move on to the next thing, or the next thing's still kind of like in the same category, but giving validity to this fear or to this point is that money stress is heightened by headcount. You don't have, and I think what we're saying is we didn't feel that stress as children. I think our parents probably did. I know my dad did. I know my mother did. I know I feel it more because of the more children that I have. However, I do feel it critical to never let my children think that they're a cause of any of this stress, right? Like, money problems are still, it's a problem. If you're low on resources, that is going to affect your life. And it is something that is so worth trying to get on top of and trying to be good at, because it's really, I think it becomes far more difficult to enjoy the blessing of children when you are constantly battling the deficiency of funds, or there being too much month at the end of the money and really being stressed about groceries. Like, this doesn't negate the blessing of children, but I do think it makes it more difficult to enjoy the blessing of children when that is just a constant stress. And we've lived in seasons of that, and who knows, we may again, and it's not that those children aren't a blessing if those seasons come again. But I don't want our children to feel that stress. And I would, if we enter that season again, I will fight tooth and nail to get out of that season so that we can go to the grocery store and purchase groceries that we think are nutritious and are fun and we all get excited about and not be, stressed about it.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because just like the first point, it is a real thing. Mm-hmm. It's a real thing, but it also could be a big motivator. Just like, okay, having a lot of children is a motivator to improve our capabilities and our awareness of each child's needs. Having more children is also a driver. I know it is for you. It was for both of our fathers, especially as primary providers that are carrying the weight of the provision of the family, to be like, okay, how do I figure this out? It's a big motivator.
It is.
And so it's not to say it doesn't exist.
Yes.
I mean, our first baby, just our first, because we didn't have money figured out in the first 9 months. And we bought cloth diapers at a thrift store that were used because we couldn't afford a pack of the other diapers. It was cheaper to buy 10 cloth diapers than it was to buy, 20 disposables that were going to be gone that week. So we felt this. We felt it with our first 4 kids. And it's a real thing.
Yeah. And again, my dad, and I think your dad too, but my dad took this seriously. Mm-hmm. He wasn't going to just keep bringing children into the world and, getting my mom pregnant and then just being like, well, the this is what we're always going to make. You just got to figure it out. Like, he didn't put that burden on my mom. He really took the financial burden upon himself. And, you know, when the family was started, he was working at a log yard, and his earning capacity was very limited there. And he saw that. He went back to the family logging business. His earning capacity was small on the avenue that they were pursuing when it came to how they were running their business. So he branched out and started working with two timber owning families, managing their timber and really kind of becoming their go-to guy when it came to when to log and when not to log. They weren't working the Weyerhaeuser contracts anymore or the big timber companies anymore, because that was just a nickel and dime game. And he's like, the ceiling is it's very obvious here, and it's not going to really work for our family. So he branched out. So I say this, and then that led into real estate investments, which led, you know, into the coffee industry, which led into more businesses that provided wealth for us down the road. But it stemmed from my dad taking seriously the role of provider on a financial basis. He didn't just say, well, this is my job, this is what I'm going to have forever, and let's keep getting pregnant. He was really creative and worked his face off as well to grow his earning capacity.
It's something I do want to challenge when people give these random like lists of how much it costs to raise a child over 18 years starting in 2024 or whatever online. That's just like, what are they saying a child needs? You know, like, all you guys paid for your own college, right? Or the majority, at least all you boys did. And I think, okay, well, that's great. Like, they got their degree, they paid for it. None of you were just sitting back with your arms crossed going like, well, my parents didn't pay for my college because they chose to have all these other kids instead. You know, I think of that with, in regards to buying our own cars. Like Elisha and I, we all bought our own cars in our families. And like, I see that as a really healthy thing when you're an adult to start feeling the weight of responsibility for yourself. And so I do think a lot of these things can actually be pros too, when you're starting to feel that sense of responsibility and that sense of accomplishment to start purchasing things for yourself. You know, we weren't 10 years old running around shining shoes so we could afford living in our parents' home. They took care of the necessities. But it's like, if we wanted to buy extra stuff, we worked odd jobs and bought that extra stuff. And I never, again, saw any correlation between the amount of kids in our family and having to do that. It was just like, this is what we do in our home. It builds your work ethic. You're going to learn how to run a business. You're going to learn all these things. And I saw it very helpful, as being very helpful growing up. Yeah,
that was the next point I was going to move into, because I kind of lumped it together with finances, but that was college and then just or work opportunities for your children. And that there's, you know, again, the sociologists or the academic journals, you know, cite statistics to show that, you know, children from larger families have less opportunity when it comes to college, or the finances aren't there for private colleges and so forth. And yeah, you brought up a great point, Katie, and that me and all my siblings paid our way through college. So that meant not the private Christian colleges. I just wasn't going to do that, right? All my friends went to the private Christian. I mean, literally every single one of my close high school friends went to private Christian colleges that were, I mean, at the time, I don't know what they are now, but I would think it was like $54,000 a year. And I was like, whoa. And, you know, you can work through scholarships and stuff like that. And I know people take that route, but it's like, I am not going to do that. And so community college was an easy choice for me if I was going to be paying for myself. And that's where all my siblings started. It was 2 years, the community college, you get to live at home. And then you can go on to various, you know, state schools from there. I guess a couple of my siblings have graduated from private schools, but that was like, they finished at private, you know, more expensive schools. The bulk of their, you know, their undergrad stuff was all taking place, you know, community college and then state schools. And so that said, my parents took it seriously, providing us with opportunities. And so again, bringing validity to this point, does your child need the private school and that high tuition? No, they don't. But I do think we should set our kids up for success. We should really think about setting our children up for success when it comes to a profession, when it comes to their ability to get into colleges, when it comes to the network that we've created for them to tap into when they are in those young adult years and they want to grow as a professional. And my parents took that very seriously. And so even though they weren't going to be sending us to the, you know, private Christian colleges and paying our tuition, just like they weren't going to be buying us our first car, they really took it upon themselves to give us skill sets, to introduce us to people, to give us a vision, to brainstorm ideas for businesses or for various careers that we could pursue from, age, from in our teens all the way through our young adult years. And I mean, my dad's the first guy I call too when I need to brainstorm business stuff, right? Like, and so it's not like this has ended, but I do think that is, to give validity to the point, if you just think that's going to work itself out, I think you're not doing a good service to your children and equipping them to be providers and to be professionals and to add value in the workplace and out in the market. So I don't think you need, of course, to go to the elite, exclusive, expensive schools to do well. But I do think you need to be intentional when you're a parent to set your kid up with skill sets and to get them ready to enter the workforce and to bring value.
Well, you think of it, it's like, what is at the root? Why do we want to send our kids to an Ivy League school or a private Christian school or whatever the case may be, the high income schools? Because it's an opportunity and we want to give our kids the best opportunities. So not every child needs the exact same opportunity. And so I think that's what some of these stat sheets get wrong, is they're saying, well, to give your child this opportunity, it's going to cost X amount. But that's not saying that's necessarily even the best opportunity for the child. When I look at you boys that are providing in your family, you're all above average earning capacity, okay, like here in the States, and it wasn't through that specific college route. And so if you want your boys to be high income earners or great providers, you want your daughters to be accomplished and educated and all these things, there are so many ways to give them that experience, I would say. And so it's not taking anything from the child to not give them, well, you can't give them this opportunity. And you're like, yeah, that's what literally every family's dealing with, is a set of variables, and you work within those variables.
Right.
It doesn't mean it can't lead to a fantastic outcome of happiness and
effectiveness,
health
and impact,
and all those things.
Right.
And even like on a very materialistic side, wealth. Okay.
Right.
It's not limited to the avenues that we're told we have to go through in order to achieve these things.
Yep. Absolutely. Totally agree. And I'll say, I know you said, but it doesn't just happen too, because I think this is also an attitude in the big family culture. And that is really being like, college is dumb. College is stupid. My kids are going to be just fine. It's like, well, what do you mean by just fine? Right? Like, are you giving them skill sets in other areas? Like, I'm all for opting out of college if you're going to be pursuing something else very proactively and developing skill sets and equipping your children to have great impact out in the world.
Yeah, with every single one of these, we're saying, well, that can be a myth.
Right.
But it also can be true.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, I'm going to just say one more. There was a few that I was going to go through, but I'll just kind of say this last one because of time.
Fast if you want to, too.
Oh, okay. So one was being made fun of or being judged or stared at, standing out in public settings. Again, definitely that was exactly my experience growing up. All of the above, being made fun of, being stared at, being judged. People being upset with my parents for how many children they brought into the world, being uncomfortable in situations because of how many of us there were visiting churches and taking up a whole row when, everybody that's there wishes you were just sending your kids to children's church, going into a restaurant and, just having all the servers and, the waiters and waitresses kind of like argue over who wants to take it because they don't want to take all the kids, there. And so, yeah, like this definitely happened. However, it's not that we loved it and we wanted to be antagonistic in any of these environments. I think my parents took it upon themselves to go above and beyond when it came to how we presented. If we were going out to eat, well, then my dad was going to go above and beyond in his tip or just in the way that they communicated with the server. Okay. Do you need to? No, but do you want to leave a good impression? Well, then maybe think about how you're tipping, or consider that you have like a 10 times bigger mess that they're picking up than any other table. Those are real things. And so just be conscientious of that. And I think my parents were, and then turn that into a positive. Like you get to set the mood because of how many troops are bringing into this situation, right? You really get to set the culture. And even though there were a few moments of awkwardness, it quickly became a good thing to everybody that was around when we showed up at an event. It was not a negative thing, but that didn't just automatically happen, because the mood that your family brings with you is amplified with the number of children that you have. And so if you've got a chaotic group of children, that's going to really stand out when you bring them into an environment that's supposed to be calm. Okay, so your kids might not be as chaotic as the family of 2 children, right? Their children might be way worse behaved. They might be way more wild and rowdy and chaotic. But if your 6 kids roll in and they're kind of chaotic, guess who everybody's going to blame the chaos on? Like nobody's going to care about the family with 1 or 2 kids that were misbehaved. They will only mention your family. And so my parents took it upon themselves to not be chaotic in environments. And I feel the same way now with our children. It's like I'm probably overly strict when it comes to inside behavior or outside behavior, or the voice that, the volume that they're speaking with or not speaking with. That's how my parents were with us. But because, like your family is going to be the family that's remembered for better or for worse.
Yeah, this is really fun, because when Elisha and I were starting out in business, we did some things that were very, very difficult, network marketing being one of them. And something that we would tell ourselves over and over and over is this quote: we have to live like, who said the quote? Live like no one else.
I think it's a Dave Ramsey quote, isn't it?
No, that's a Dave Ramsey quote. Great quote, but sorry, we're going to do a different quote.
Okay.
It's
Changing gears here.
Changing gears. It's the quote. You have to deal with the lack of respect, the temporary lack of respect from people now.
From ignorant people now, I think is how it goes.
Yeah,
but
you got to
just
say
from
ignorant
people now.
people so you feel better about yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so
those morons judging me. They don't even know.
But you have to deal with a level of temporary disrespect.
Yep.
And I forget what the end of the quote is. But the point is that people's disrespect for what you're doing is temporary. Mm-hmm. If you stick to something, if you do it well, if you do it graciously. Mm. We actually experienced that in network marketing, which is cool. Yeah. And so I think this happens with children as well, where there is a point, like my mother had family members threaten to call CPS on her because of how my family was being raised, like meaning me. She had other family members. She came from a big family of 12 kids, and they said, hey, times are different now. Stop having kids. What are you doing? You're insane. So these are from people that were really close to her. And guess what? Guess who loves our family now? Those exact same family members. And I think of that with my whole family and your whole family.
Same. Yep.
They're just magnets for people wanting to spend time with them, wanting to hang out with them, just thrilled that they're going to come over and hang out. But my parents had to deal, and your parents had to deal with this temporary lack of respect. Yeah. And then on the flip side, there was a time when once I hit my teens and our family, like everyone wanted our family to be there.
Dude,
and we were the cool family.
Yes.
I don't know what happened. The Voetbergs were like the coolest family to us.
But we weren't. Like, that's what I'm saying is that.
But you guys hit a point where the fruit of your life, everyone wanted to be a part of. People wanted to hang out at your house. I mean, I'm talking like secular people, public schooled people, people who were not even married, who didn't share any of the same beliefs. You know, I think of some of your musician friends, and it's like they just wanted to be around you guys. And
well, similarly with your family, and this isn't it's not like that's the goal is to be popular and have everybody like you, but it is there is a bizarre, I think, cycle that can happen.
I'm just saying it happens.
It happened. Exactly. Where those negative things are, it's not fun to be judged. It's not fun to be made fun of. You know, it's not fun to sometimes stick out like a sore thumb when you go places. And we've all experienced that probably now. It's like we can be dialed in sometimes, have the kids' all the hairs combed.
All 2 of them.
And be like, we're dialed in. And we all know all it takes is one kid falling, tripping over the grocery cart, and then they're tripping over somebody else. And you guys look, and we look like you instantly look like an undone mess, right? And so you can't take that, like it just happens. You're going to look not all the way put together. You're going to stand out, I guess is what I already said. And if it's for the better, praise the Lord. And hopefully, God gets the glory and honor for it, because we know how insufficient we are of actually making that, making it look that way for a sustained amount of time. And you don't want to just be doing things for optics. You want it to be coming from a place of joy and, real fruit in your life.
I think that's the takeaway here is our kids need to know, hey, it's okay. Like they see us doing things because we're living for God, not for people's opinion. I think of that verse from Paul, I know how to abase and I know how to abound. It's like we want our children to know how to deal with like, hey, I'm awkward, I'm sticking out, and you know what? That's fine. And also know how to not let it go to their heads when all of a sudden they're all that.
Yep.
And because there will be times when people think they're just better than sliced bread.
Yes.
And so I think that regardless of what happens, it's like, we're the same person no matter what.
Yes.
We're doing what God's calling us to no matter what. And our family size is not going to, or how we raise our family, whether it's odd or whether it's applauded.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's the Rudyard Kipling poem, Rudy, he says it so well. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And I think that happens many times when you're in this journey of raising your children. You have these moments of triumph where you're like, dude, you guys crushed it in church. The hairs all stayed combed. You sat still. And the older people are coming up to you and telling you what a blessing it was. And then the very next, but you can't let that go to your head, right? You deal with that triumph and you're like, that's great. But then the following week, there could be a total disaster. One of your kids throws up or there's all sorts of mess. They're fighting in there. You have to take them all out. And it could be a disaster. And you treat those two imposters just the same because they're temporary. It's a moment that's passing in time. And I think that we have to have that in mind when we are in those years of looking of it just being a real spectacle, right? A real spectacle when you show up at places, whether that's for the good or for the bad.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Anyways,
What if we did a part 2?
Well, I mean, sure, we could do a part 2.
I think it'd be fun.
Great. Then we'll wrap it up, folks. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.